In the Ozark hills of Missouri, where the trees grow thick and shadows stretch long across the valleys, stood a lonely clapboard house on Black Hollow Road. By the turn of the century, it had already earned a reputation few dared speak aloud. Travelers avoided it, children whispered about it, and grown men swore they'd seen lamplight flicker through its rotting windows when no one lived there. But the house's true terror wasn't the sagging roof or the cracked chimney. It was the bed inside, an oak frame, heavy as stone, still polished though decades had passed. That bed was tied to Nora Mae Lyle, the girl who died upon it. Folks said her spirit never left, that her grief clung to the boards like dew on grass. You could walk by the house on a summer night and swear you heard soft weeping, as though the wood itself remembered her sorrow. Nora Mae Lyle was born into poverty, one of 6 children in a farming family that scraped a living from the rocky soil of the Ozarks. Life was hard. Winters bit like wolves, and summers brought storms that flattened the corn. Yet somehow Nora seemed untouched by the meanness of the world. She had hair the color of honey, eyes that caught light, and a voice that rang pure when she sang hymns at the tiny clapboard church. People said her singing could lift a weary soul better than any sermon. But beneath that brightness, Nora felt different. While her sisters spoke of marriage and housekeeping, she dreamed of books she never had, of far-off places she would never see. She was tender-hearted but restless, as though she belonged to another world. That restlessness, though, would become her undoing. At 17, Nora caught the eye of Henry Tully, the blacksmith's son. Henry was strong, steady, and admired by all in the hollow. His laugh boomed like a hammer's strike, and his broad shoulders made him the pride of his father's forge. Yet with Nora, he was gentle. Their love blossomed in quiet ways, walking by the creek, sharing apples under the sycamore tree, dancing in the lantern glow at barn gatherings. Henry promised her he'd build a future, even if his father frowned on her poor family. "We'll make our own luck," he told her, and she believed him. For the first time, Nora felt she might belong. Still, whispers carried through town that the Tullys wanted a wealthier match for Henry. Nora tried to ignore them, but deep down, she feared that love might not be enough to fight the weight of family expectations. One humid summer evening, thunder rolled across the hollow. Nora sat at her window, quilt pulled around her shoulders, waiting for Henry. He had promised to come after finishing work at the forge. Lightning split the sky, revealing the darkened hills. Rain fell in sheets, hammering the roof. She clutched the ribbon he had given her, whispering prayers for his safety. But as the hours passed, dread set in. At dawn, a neighbor knocked on the Lyles' door. Henry had been thrown from his horse in the storm, his leg crushed. Though he lived, his father cursed Nora, saying Henry had rushed to meet her and paid the price. The words cut deeper than the thunder had, planting guilt inside her chest. From then on, Nora could not see a storm without remembering the accident, without wondering if her love had cursed Henry's fate. To comfort her, Nora's father crafted something with his own rough hands, a bed of solid oak. It was heavy, polished, smooth, built to last through generations. "A place to rest, child," he told her. Nora loved it at once. She spread quilts across it, embroidered with wildflowers she stitched by lamplight. She tucked pressed violets between the slats, as though trying to root her dreams in the wood. At night, she lay awake, imagining Henry healed, strong again, and by her side. In her heart, she believed the bed would someday hold their shared future. But time passed, and Henry's limp remained. Worse, his father's disapproval grew sharper. What was meant as her sanctuary became the witness to her sorrow, recording every tear she cried into its silent grain. Henry did return months later, limping but alive. He came to Nora's door with eyes full of determination. "Marry me anyway," he begged. "We'll manage somehow." For a moment, hope flickered in her heart. But Henry's father had threatened to disown him if he chose her. The Tully farm was their livelihood, and Henry could not abandon it. He stood between love and duty, torn in two. Nora, though breaking inside, released him. "Don't fight for me," she whispered, pressing her hand to his cheek. "Fight for your future." Henry wept, but obeyed. That night, Nora collapsed onto her bed, clutching the quilt to her chest. She had saved him from choosing, but in doing so, she had carved out her own happiness and buried it alive. Seasons turned, but Nora never recovered. The once lively girl who sang hymns now stayed in her room, curtains drawn. She stared from her bed at the distant hills, but her eyes were far away. Neighbors noticed she no longer joined Sunday services. Her sisters whispered of how her dresses hung loose on her frame, how she moved like a ghost. Her father tried to cheer her, but his words fell into silence. The oak bed, once a symbol of love and strength, became a prison. She wrote letters to Henry, full of love and forgiveness, but sealed them away, too afraid to send them. Each night she tucked them beneath her pillow, as if the bed itself could keep her secrets. The winter of 1899 brought a fever that swept through the hollow like fire through dry grass. Families fell sick, neighbors buried neighbors. Nora, too, was struck. For days, she lay trembling in her bed, sweat soaking her quilts, lips parched. Her father sat vigil, holding her hand, praying aloud. Through her delirium, she whispered Henry's name, calling for him as though love alone could heal her. But by dawn, one January morning, her chest stilled. The oak bed groaned beneath her final breath. Some swore the room grew colder at that moment, as if her spirit refused to leave. Nora Mae Lyle was 20 years old when they buried her on the hill above Black Hollow Road. Her father could not bring himself to dismantle her bed. It remained exactly as she had left it. Quilts folded, pressed violets fading in the slats, her letters hidden beneath the pillow. He closed the door and never entered again. When he too passed, the house was left to decay. Weeds grew high, shutters sagged, but still, the bed stood untouched. Neighbors swore that on quiet nights, they saw lamplight flicker from her room, though no one lived there. The sound of a woman's weeping floated through the hollow, carried on the wind. Black Hollow Road became a place of dread, and children dared each other only to step onto its porch. In 1905, a traveling family sought shelter in the abandoned Lyle house during a storm. They laid their children upon the oak bed, thinking nothing of it. At midnight, the children screamed. Their parents rushed in to find them wide-eyed with terror, pointing at the foot of the bed. They swore a pale young woman had sat beside them, stroking their hair, whispering, "Stay with me. Don't leave me alone." The family fled into the rain, never to return. By morning, the story had spread. The bed was no longer a relic, it was cursed. For decades, no one bought the house. Farmers claimed their cattle refused to graze near it. Hunters heard hymns floating from the trees. Teenagers dared each other to touch the bed, but those who did reported sudden chills, dreams of drowning sorrow, or the feeling of invisible hands pressing against their shoulders. All agreed on one thing: the spirit was not angry, she was lonely. Nora's grief had bound her to the oak frame, her yearning echoing through generations. And so the bed remained, solid and immovable, a tomb for love unspoken. By the 1960s, folklore scholar Evelyn Crane arrived in the Ozarks to collect ghost stories. A practical woman, she dismissed most tales as rural superstition. Yet when she heard of Nora Mae's bed, something pulled her there. She found the house crumbling, roof sagging, walls splitting, but the bed still gleamed with the polish of her father's hand. It seemed untouched by time. Evelyn sat upon it, notebook in hand, intending only to observe, but the air turned cold, her breath misted, the silence deepened into something heavy. Then came a soft sound, a hum, delicate and mournful, as if someone was singing just for her. Evelyn would later write that she felt a weight press the mattress beside her, as though another body had settled there. She froze, pen trembling in her hand. In the shadowed corner of the room, she glimpsed the faint outline of a girl, young, gaunt, with eyes hollow but pleading. She did not threaten. She only looked at Evelyn with sorrow so deep it pierced her heart. Evelyn fled the house, shaking, yet what haunted her most was not fear, but compassion. She only wanted to be heard, Evelyn wrote in her journal. Evelyn returned days later with townsfolk. Together they searched the room. Beneath the bed frame, hidden in a small box, they found Nora's unsent letters. They were yellowed, but intact. Each was addressed, some to Henry, some to her father, some to a future I'll never see. Evelyn read them aloud, her voice breaking. The letters spoke of forgiveness, longing, and a love that endured even in despair. As the last letter was read, the room grew strangely warm. Some swore the air smelled of violets. For the first time in memory, no weeping was heard. Among the letters was one sealed envelope addressed to Henry Tully. Though decades had passed, Evelyn sought out his descendants. She found them in a nearby town, where Henry's elderly daughter still lived. The woman listened, tears streaming down her face as Evelyn read Nora's words aloud. "He never stopped mentioning her," she confessed. "He married my mother, but he died whispering Nora's name. He carried guilt all his life, believing he had abandoned her." Evelyn placed the letter in her hands. The old woman clutched it to her chest, saying, "Perhaps now both their souls can rest." The townsfolk gathered at the abandoned house one final time. They laid Nora's letters upon her bed, sang hymns she once loved, and prayed for her peace. As the last note faded, some claimed they saw a shadow lift from the bed frame, dissolving into the morning light. Others swore they heard a final sigh, soft and content. Whether it was imagination or something beyond, all agreed on one thing: the weeping had ended. Nora had finally been heard, and forgiveness had bridged the gap death could not. The bed was removed from the decaying house and placed in the local historical society. No longer a cursed relic, it was preserved as a symbol of love, sorrow, and endurance. Visitors came to read Nora's letters, leaving flowers and even writing their own notes of regret or forgiveness to place upon the quilt. The bed had transformed from a haunting into a sanctuary, a mirror of human longing. Nora Mae's story was no longer one of fear, but of remembrance, a lesson carved into oak and time alike. Years later, a teacher brought her students to the museum. She told them of Nora's short life, her lost love, her silence, and her haunting. "Say the words while you can," she told them gently. "Don't let fear silence love. Don't wait until it's too late." The children listened, wide-eyed. One boy would later reconcile with his estranged father because of her words. A girl found courage to forgive her mother. Nora's story, once whispered with dread, now healed the living. Though some still whisper of shadows around the bed, most believe Nora has found peace. Visitors sometimes feel a sudden warmth, hear a faint hymn, or smell wildflowers when no bouquet is near. Rather than fear, these moments bring comfort. "She's thanking us," one woman said after leaving a note of forgiveness on the quilt. Whether ghost or memory, Nora Mae's presence has softened, her sorrow reshaped into blessing. The bed is no longer haunted, it is hallowed. A century after her death, Nora Mae Lyle is remembered not as the girl who haunted a bed, but as the young woman whose love endured beyond her years. Her letters, her sorrow, and her voice carried a message through generations. Speak your heart, forgive while you can, and hold fast to love even when the world denies it. In the end, her true haunting was not in lamplight flickers or weeping heard at night. It was in the way her story refused to fade, inspiring strangers far beyond the Ozarks. And perhaps that is the greatest ghost of all, not her sorrow, but her enduring lesson. Love, when spoken, can outlive death itself.